really excited about this particular session, in part because I think there's been so much debate about sports infrastructure, stadiums, are they actually worth the cost? We have two fantastic CEOs here who have brought a lot of fresh thinking to the industry. So let me, without further ado, introduce both of them. We have our out-of-towner, Steve Cannon, President and CEO of AMB Group, oversees the operations of the Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, does the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which thank you very much for the Super Bowl, very well done. And of course, many of you know Michael Friisdahl, President and CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, owner of parent company, I should say, Maple Leafs, Argonauts, Toronto FC, and the Raptors, in addition to the venues in which they play. So let me start by basically having each of you tell me a little bit about what you feel you brought to the job. You've been in it a few years, and give us a sense as to what you're doing. I'm going to start with you, Steve.
Okay. So I'm an outsider to the sports industry. I came from the car business. I was the CEO for Mercedes-Benz in North America until we moved the company to Atlanta, and I met Arthur Blank and made a pretty radical career shift from cars to sports. I think what I bring to the table that I think is really relevant in the sports business is kind of a fanatical focus on the customer. You know, at the end of the day, in the sports business, we're an entertainment business, and our competition is getting better all the time, and that's the 80-inch flat screen, high-definition television in every living room. And unless our product doesn't obsess over the customer experience, the fan experience, and deliver value every single day, we're going to lose more and more people to the couch.
And are you actually queuing up, but you actually prepared a video for us, am I correct?
Well, just a small little
A
teaser.
small little taste.
Yeah, just a little taste.
So let's go to the video and then have Michael say a few words. You mentioned neither of you come from sports, and just to give a full sense as to, you know, just the kind of Renaissance thinking we have on stage, I should point out that Steve was recently voted Outstanding American for the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Last year, Michael, you were Design Thinker of the Year, and I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, MLSE was just voted the best place to work in Canada. Is that correct? So
yeah, that's correct.
Everybody, if you've got an application, by all means, come up. But Steve, I want to start with you because you know you're a West Point grad. You mentioned you had 2 decades in the auto industry. How did that shape your thinking coming into this job?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it when I started with the intro. Is you know, when you purchase a premium product like a Mercedes-Benz, you're delivering not just the car, you're delivering an experience, and it's a lifelong experience. And so what we tried to do on my watch was just to create the most memorable ownership delivery experience that we possibly could. And that's not easy to do, to organize an entire company, the culture, the reward systems around delivering excellence in customer care. So that was honestly kind of a one-for-one. I took that page from the playbook from Mercedes and applied it to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And you know, and our mantra at the stadium is we're a stadium that aspires to be a Ritz-Carlton. We want to deliver a level of care and hospitality.
Ergo, the artisanal beer, right?
All of that stuff.
You brought that in.
The table stakes are higher, consumer expectations are higher, and it's an NFL game is not a cheap product. It's a commitment on the fans' part, so we have to deliver a premium experience to honor that.
Now, Michael, I know that in addition to creating Air Canada Rouge, which is perhaps a different kind of premium experience, low cost, you started your career as an entrepreneur, creating a travel wholesale business, became the Holiday Network, you know, Thomas Cook, obviously Air Canada. How did that affect your thinking when you came to the job?
Well, you know, Diane, first of all, I want to thank the forum for bringing both Steve and I up here. It's a pleasure to be here. And very much like Steve, my background is not in sports. And I think our ownership group really made a decision to look for executive leadership and marry that with very strong team leadership. So we're blessed with some very strong team leaders in Masai, Brendan, and Bill Manning. And so the combination of the two have really been a great match, and we've been able to obviously focus on winning, creating a winning culture. And when you look at my background and bringing those two together, being a consumer-facing industry in the airline sector, obviously filling airplane seats, filling arena seats, premium experiences, premium dining, the overall customer and digital experience that goes along with that has really helped me in this role.
So I want to talk about some of the technology you guys have introduced, but first I want to get to the theme of this conversation, which is positive impact, because not everybody has felt it's been a positive impact. There has been a lot of debate in places like California and elsewhere is it worth it? Is it worth it to have these big stadiums? I'm curious to hear both of you talk about this, especially as we're talking this morning and about how cities are changing, how infrastructure is changing. How does that sort of change the metrics of how you bring value to the communities? Let's start with you.
So building Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta was a heavy, heavy lift, and we are part of a public-private partnership. Hotel Motel Tax supported a $200 million bond of a $1.6 billion stadium. So it is a partnership. And honestly, when I look at the public benefit now from the other side of the curtain, looking out, I can absolutely say the value. We're committed to bringing global events to Atlanta, to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We just hosted the Super Bowl, phenomenal event, also a very heavy lift. But the economic impact of that event in our city is estimated at $400 million. So
you have a lot of CEOs come to that too, right?
We do, and ultimately I did, with our team, relocate the Mercedes-Benz headquarters to Atlanta. And one of the primary reasons that we relocated is access to talent and quality of life. Talent goes to where the quality of life is best. And in a city like Atlanta that had just invested $3 billion in a new Braves stadium and a new Atlanta Falcons stadium, Atlanta United, and the Hawks got a new upgrade on their arena. $3 billion of investment went into that infrastructure. That infrastructure ladders up to quality of life, which is an attraction for talent.
Does the metrics change here in Ontario? I mean, I know obviously you've got the province, you've had a lot of support. Talk a little bit about that public-private relationship that you have here and how it's translated across the different teams and venues.
Well, obviously, sports is a key part of the fabric of a city, as is entertainment in general, and so it's a huge community builder, and it's something that glues us all together. And I think that was evidenced with the Raptors World Championship win here, and the parade and everything that went along with it. And when we saw how that translated across Canada, with more than 60 Jurassic Parks, really from coast to coast, and then as Steve quite correctly pointed out, the economic benefits that brings. Which is literally hundreds of millions, and like Steve had the Super Bowl, we had the All-Star not that many years ago, and those types of events, not only do they bring a lot of economic benefit, but they also put the city on the global map. So when you look at the coverage that we get around the world, it is absolutely massive. So we're big believers in public and private partnerships. We've done that in many ways. While we totally funded as an organization the build of the then Air Canada Centre, now the Scotiabank Arena. We worked closely with both the provincial government, the city government to invest in venues, including BMO Field, where MLSE essentially invested $130 million in a city-owned asset. And if you look at our foundation with our MLSE launch pad, there was a roller skating rink that had been sitting empty for more than 20 years, and we put a lot of money into that jointly with the city, and now it's become a youth center that hosts more than 8,000 kids a year.
Still with some roller skating, I hope. Fond memories of that.
Not so much roller skating anymore, but there's a lot of sports, I can assure you.
So let me talk a little bit about technology. You alluded to the fact that we have excellent technology in our homes, which makes it tougher to compete, to bring people, out of those couches into your stadiums. How are you using technology differently, both, on site and also engaging with fans elsewhere?
It starts with your kind of core infrastructure. We invested in a fully fiber optic stadium, which essentially gives us unlimited bandwidth for our fans and for our guests. If anybody's been to a sporting event lately, the normal behavior is to kind of have that phone out and you're either checking scores or you're live streaming out. So we have the bandwidth for 72,000 fans to simultaneously share on their social channels the event that's taking place. Now, that wasn't that wasn't commonplace 10 or 20 years ago. So that is driving the investment decisions that we have to make. And like I said, the consumer expectations just keep going up. And if you bring them into an old-fashioned stadium that doesn't allow them to connect to their people and to their social channels, they're just not going to come.
Is that the most important thing, actually, just having that connectivity, or are there other aspects? I mean, talk a little bit about how you're using technology, reimagination or otherwise, in terms of what's around the corner.
Well, we actually view it as a two-pronged approach. So we have 13 million fans that follow our teams. And so they're not all going to be able to attend a game at either the arena or the stadium or what have you. And so it's equally important for us to connect on a one-on-one basis with fans that can't necessarily attend the games, as well as making sure that when fans come to the arena or the stadium that they have an experience which continuously improve. And like Steve, the technology enhancements are continuously evolving and something that we have to be on the forefront of. And to that extent, we actually launched the first digital labs in North America, where we focus on not just the fan experience, but we also spend a lot of time on our teams and performance enhancements and coaching tools and
like an
injury
incubator?
prevention.
What's the digital lab?
Well, it's where we have some of the best and the brightest really working together with our digital team to come up with where we believe we're going to be able to add a lot of value in improving the fan experience and improving the environment for our teams.
Can you give us a taste of what's around the corner? You were about to add something.
So I'll just give a couple other examples. I mean, now we've done away with paper tickets. Paper tickets are fraudulent in many cases, so we've eliminated fraud. We've allowed people to essentially share their season tickets with a swipe to anyone in their friends or family circle. So now you scan in with your...
Undercutting StubHub. No.
No, they're working together with us. But now you scan in with your app. You're going to get game data on your app. You're going to be able to, next year, pay for your food and your beverage through your app, which gives us the kind of data that'll allow us to dial in our product offering even better. We're looking even further out at facial recognition, primarily from a security standpoint, out on the perimeter when we're looking at folks coming in. Are there any watch list kinds of folks? We're not there yet, and that's a sensitive subject that sort of sits on a fault line of privacy, so we're going to have to be careful with that. But again, it's a dynamic field, and consumer expectations keep changing. So unless we're not agile enough to meet those expectations, again, people will stay home on their comfortable couch watching their 80-inch flat screen.
And maybe just to add to that, so while we're doing a lot of what Steve just highlighted, we will
Including
go to...
facial recognition?
Not yet, no. But what we will be doing is looking at things like a Nexus type of setup where you have a trusted fan program where you can enter the building in a much more efficient and fast way. When you look at some of the additional digital benefits, it could be anything from wayfinding, where the shortest lines for concessions, for washrooms, for entry into the building. Those are the types of things that are going to come and are well underway. And quite frankly, when you look at the evolution of the apps and how things have progressed over just the last couple of years and what the future holds, it's going to be a totally different and improved experience as we look ahead.
One of the things, obviously when a team, you've got the Super Bowl or the Raptors are winning, everybody's a sports fan, but a lot of people maybe don't care that much about sports. They're living in a city. Why should they welcome the idea of these sort of marquee stadiums? And talk a little bit about how you're engaging the broader community. I know, of course, there's a lot of entertainment that comes in, but do you feel like that's something, that relationship's changing as cities themselves change?
So there's clearly an argument for the rising tide floats all boats, and our stadium in downtown has absolutely enhanced the downtown landscape of the city of Atlanta. An enormous investment project is happening right on our flank. It's a project that's going to recapture almost 30 city blocks. It's a $10 billion investment that's going to really enrich downtown. It's got nothing to do with sports. Without what's happened at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that would never have happened. So suddenly, this one big investment is begetting other large investments that will all enhance the downtown quality of life for every citizen, whether you're a sport fan or not.
Do you feel you've been a magnet for other types of investment? Obviously, Toronto is, there's a lot of vibrant work going on in many different capacities, from sidewalk to et cetera.
Well, there's no question. When you look at the development around the Scotiabank Arena and you compare that to when it was built in 1998, it's a completely different neighborhood today, and that's continuing to evolve. I also would like to add that in addition to sports, you mentioned sports, our live and entertainment business is a big part of what we do. And so in the case of the Scotiabank Arena, we're the in the top 5 in North America in terms of being the busiest buildings and number 9 in the world. And so when you get that type of activity, it is not only around sports, it's around culture, it's around music, it's around entertainment, it really becomes a gathering spot. And so there's no question that has had a significant impact.
So, let's say there are policymakers in the audience, there are other municipalities that are looking at how they sort of develop their infrastructure. What message or advice do you have to them, or perhaps rather than pain points, let's think of it as untapped opportunities that you feel, perhaps could be happening in the next few years? I'm going to start with you, because you did look nationwide.
It starts with the mindset that public and private, if done thoughtfully, can really enhance the infrastructure of a city. We need to get away from sort of the fat cat narrative that it's billionaire owners that are just sort of using public money to enrich themselves. Done well and done right, it is not a zero-sum game, your money versus our money. It really can enrich the entire community. And there's so many examples. Like Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a LEED Platinum building. It's one of the only stadiums in the world that is LEED Platinum. We did that because to operate in a downtown environment, we wanted to be a good citizen. We incurred those incremental costs to make sure that we were setting the example that said we are going to be a good neighbor. So for me, at the end, it's the mindset. If you come together creatively as partners, how can we all benefit from this? If that's the prevailing mindset, you can do really good things.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I think when you look at some of the global events, whether it's the Super Bowl in Atlanta this past year, or it's the All-Star, or even the championship run we had this year, when you look at some of those events, they're not necessarily making a ton of money. They're often an investment on behalf of the organization because they're extremely costly to put on to create kind of a global type of event. But I do think we couldn't do it without the partnership of the city and the province, and so we've enjoyed that. When we look ahead now, we've got the FIFA 2022 coming in 2022, and that's our next big global event as we see it in terms of being able to stage Toronto and really put it on the global agenda again. And so that'll be another opportunity for us to work with the city and with the provincial government to again look at BMO Field and make sure that we make that a world-class event.
I often think with sports, it's like Silicon Valley. Everybody wants to create their own Silicon Valley, and it's not easy to do. Every city would love to have a franchise and a stadium that is as successful as the ones that you both have, or multiple venues. What is it that is often missing? And so I'm going to go to you, because I know that you've, rather than talking about specific, by all means, name names, but what do you think people don't get, perhaps, in terms of the formula that actually creates success? And maybe again think about what you did, what needed to change when you came into this.
So I think it starts with the mindset of ownership. If the mindset of ownership is purely profit and loss, you're going to leave lots of opportunity on the table. My experience across a couple of leagues now is that most of these entrepreneurs, Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons and Atlanta United, he cares deeply about the community. He's a man who signed the Giving Pledge, so he's given away 95% of his net worth back to society, and he's more concerned about how he's going to give his money away to the benefit of Atlanta and the world, which is great. So at the end, stadiums, sports can be community builders and rally points that bring people together. And don't underestimate that power. I mean, in the United States, it feels like we're as divided a country as we've ever been, with right shouting at left, and there are just so few places that you can go to just be joyful and to cheer and to come together.
Shout at each other.
So alone, independent of economics, I would argue in favor of the power of sport. Nelson Mandela quote, one of my favorites, sport has the power to change the world. I believe in that. So economics, I can make that argument all day, but I'll make the other argument just in terms of benefit to people and bringing people together and giving them joy in their lives. That alone has a return on investment.
Michael, I want to go to the fact that you were Design Thinker of the Year, because design thinking is not something that I associate with sports infrastructure. How have you brought design thinking into this? And give me some sense as to just, what that means for you. I mean,
well, so two things. I'd just like to pick up on what Steve just covered here in terms of the commitment of ownership.
Right.
And I think, like Steve, we've got a very committed ownership group. And I can assure you that there's a lot of elements of sports and entertainment that doesn't make as much money as you might think it might make. And so,
such as
big investments. And what I can tell you is having a commitment to the community is hugely important. And working through that public-private partnership is hugely important in order for us to be able to really put Toronto on the map. And I think that's helpful and great for everyone. When it comes to being Design Thinker of the Year, I have to say that wasn't me. That was the entire organization that really pulled together and ended up delivering what was some pretty unique opportunities and programs for our various different teams and our initiatives, which includes thinking outside of the box and reimagining how we not only view the fan experience in the arena and in the stadium, but also how we view it for people who follow our teams from home. And so we were fortunate to be recognized in that way, but it was really a team effort. And like Steve, no doubt, it takes a team, and we have a terrific team. We've got great leaders in our sports verticals and our music vertical, and I think pulling all of that together and working for the community and building is really what's made MLSE as successful as it is.
I'm trying to figure out to what extent you guys overlap as competitors. I guess, MLS, what would be the...
So we compete on the field, and we've met on the field between Toronto against Atlanta 6 times. Michael has the edge. We're 1, 3, and 2 against Toronto. So they're a good team. Kudos, Michael. What's great about sports leagues, though, is it's a shared playbook. Off the field, from a business standpoint, we collaborate all the time. I benchmark against other clubs in the NFL and Major League Soccer. Like our food and beverage program has been very successful. We have essentially given that out to any other sports team that's asked. Here's the demand. Here's the economics of it. This is why we did it. So
and it's high-low. That's what's interesting about your, food and beverage, isn't it? I mean, that was quite innovative.
We broke a model that we thought was broken, taking somebody into your stadium and charging them $8 for a hot dog or $14 for a beer, and there are stadiums out there that do it, is essentially disrespecting a fan base. It's saying you are a captive audience of us, and we're going to take advantage of that. We don't believe in that. A hot dog at Mercedes-Benz Stadium costs $1.50. A beer costs you $5. You could feed...
How much is Toronto hot dog? No,
you could feed a family of 4 for $30.
Yeah.
And at the end, that's our way of saying thank you for your commitment to our franchise. Coming downtown Atlanta, paying for parking, paying for a season ticket. That is a deep, deep commitment. So we're going to thank you for that commitment.
But overall revenue went up because of that artisanal beer and such.
It went up by double digits. It's a very successful business model. And at the end, any business model that starts with really happy, delighted season ticket members is a smart model.
Thank you for that handover, Steve.
Yeah,
that was
good,
great. Yeah,
I've had some good hot dogs in Toronto,
we view
but
this
they're not cheap.
as adding value here in terms of making sure at the end of the day, whether you take, and you can take different approaches, of course, at the end of the day, and we all do. Yeah. And I think one of the areas that we focused on and will continue to focus on is that total engaged fan experience from A to Z. And of course we have to be competitive, and of course we can't.
Are we going to see $1.50 hot dogs coming anytime soon?
Probably not next year.
Okay.
So
on the to-do list, on the wish list.
On the to-do list.
So our time is winding down, so I want to also just get a sense as to, let's go to the wish list, or even what's on your radar, what's exciting to you. Give us some taste as to what's next. You know, we've talked about what you're currently doing. You know, what would you be looking at going forward that maybe we don't see today?
One of the biggest and most exciting things is on our horizon is potentially being a host site for the World Cup. Now, the World Cup is a sporting event that's got an order of magnitude that dwarfs the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl, like I said, had a $400 million impact. The entire world's attention is comes together around World Cup soccer. We got plenty of time. It's not until 2026, but that's going to be one of those moments where North America shines, and it is a joint bid between Canada, United States, and Mexico. So all three countries will be hosting World Cup events. We're looking to be potentially a semifinal site for that. So that becomes an enormous moment of truth for the city of Atlanta to put its best foot forward, for Mercedes-Benz Stadium to put its best foot forward. So we got lots of time to plan, but that doesn't get any more exciting.
Unless Toronto gets it first, right?
Well,
No,
it'll be
course,
joint with the United States. So.
Now, before we end for final thoughts, I do want to talk a little bit about how you have the power, both of you and your platforms, to be expanding both the audience, but also expanding the appetite for sports. And I want to get a little bit even to women's soccer this year and the excitement that was generated. How are you thinking about some of these newer franchises, some of these developing audiences, and what are you doing to help? Anything that...
Well, so certainly in our case, we're hugely supportive of women's sports. And,
Right.
and if you look at our teams and you look at our leadership in our teams and within our organizations, we have probably one of the more diverse organizations in terms of gender diversity, both in the Raptors and now with Wickenheiser in the Leafs as well. When you look at the push the teams are making. When it comes to the leagues, we're very engaged in those discussions with whether it be the NHL for hockey or the NBA for basketball, and very supportive in that regard. We do believe that it has to be a joint effort between organizations like ourselves and the league in order to be able to really make it successful. There's been a lot of stop and starts with women's leagues, and I think it really needs to be led by the major leagues, and we will be very supportive in that regard.
Right. And I will point out that Steve is the father of 9, including 7 daughters. So there you go. So let me, in the final minutes, any final thoughts?
My own team right there.
There you go. You've got your own baseball team. Give me some sense as to just final thoughts you want to leave with the audience in sort of the, especially as we're talking about sports infrastructure and the impact it has on cities. What do you want to leave folks with? And I'm going to start with you.
Now, kind of on the inside, it's such a net positive to communities. It enriches the community. It can pay back into the community. It can bring revenue from outside in. So there's so many positives that let's just change the debate versus an us versus them into a how can we use this as a community asset and get maximum community benefit for everyone from a sports franchise.
Great. Michael?
Very much the same. I think when you look at the private-public partnerships that we want to continue to build on, and the importance that not only sports but also entertainment and culture in general has on a community, investing in the community is going to be and continue to be a huge priority for us. And so adding value by putting Toronto on the map globally and making it a global player and the platform for global events is something that's good for everyone, and that's going to be our focus.
Well, we have the gold standards right here, so please join me in thanking Steve Cannon and Michael Friisdahl, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.